Welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. This is day 4 of our special convention coverage, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. The president embracing QAnon, pushing a boycott of a major American company that happens to be located in a key swing state. So that's kind of normal. Kamala Harris makes history by accepting the vice presidential nomination, and Barack Obama gives a genuinely extraordinary speech, and that's just sort of the top line. We have to start, though, by talking about the news of the day, and we are joined by Jonathan Allen of NBC and our friend A.B. Stoddard. So, hey, thanks for joining me this morning. I appreciate it. Not like we have a lot to talk about.
Good to be with you, Charlie.
Okay. Steve freaking Bannon. This story is just breaking as we are beginning all of this. He was charged this morning in New York with fraud for his role in a scheme related to the We Build the Wall, an online fundraising effort that collected more than $25 million. Bannon and 3 other defendants, quote, defrauded hundreds of thousands of donors, capitalizing on their interest in funding a border wall to raise millions of dollars under the false pretense that all of the money would be spent on construction, said the acting U.S. attorney in Manhattan, Audrey Strauss. Oh, this just feels like all the dots are being connected here. Who wants to jump in on this one?
I'm all over that, Charlie. First of all, we built the wall. If you remember some of the prototypes of the wall, they looked a little bit more like prison bars. So I don't know, maybe that was prescient in terms of the nomenclature of this.
This just feels so meta. It feels so meta. It was like, because wasn't Mexico supposed to pay for the wall, AB?
Yeah, and let me go with the caveat. Obviously, all parties are innocent in this country until proven guilty.
Have you met Steve Bannon?
Astounding, though, that we've got another Trump campaign manager / campaign chairman charged with a federal crime. It's getting to the point now where there are more of those than people who haven't been. Manafort, Rick Gates.
Oh, sure.
Steve Bannon. And then, a variety of others who were lower levels in the 2016 campaign who have been charged with or convicted of crimes, or in some cases pleaded guilty and then got some sort of commutation or pardon from the president.
What I like about this, though, is that, yes, he joins the list of indicted Trump associates, and he might join the felon club, which, as you mentioned, contains campaign manager, deputy campaign manager, national security advisor, longtime advisor, personal lawyer. But what I like is that it's attached to a cheesy grifter scheme. And that's as we evolve out of the Trump presidency, perhaps with a Biden win into the Trump TV empire rebirth, there will be more of these. There will be so many schemes to keep the cult happy and take their money. And I look forward to more of them.
No, you phrase this cheesy grifter scheme. I mean, this thing had grift just popping off it. I mean, this was grift with like hair on it, right? I mean, We Build the Wall, the online fundraising effort. And what is interesting is, and I said meta, this is like one of the first great Trumpian grifts, right? We will build the wall and Mexico will pay for the wall. And it was a grift all the way down. And now we actually have indictments in the particular case. But this was a grift on the level of the kind of emails you get. Hey, here's a great opportunity to get in on the ground floor of this particular total complete scam. I think we have to mention, though, that this comes from the office, the Southern District of New York. This was the office where Trump / Bill Barr had fired the U.S. attorney. So this is apparently something they were working on at the time that Donald Trump told Bill Barr, "Would you get control of those guys and get rid of that Jeff Berman?"
It'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. I mean, Trump had a rift with Bannon, so it's not clear to me whether Trump is angry that Bannon was
that's right.
Potentially grifting off of Trump, or if Trump was trying to defend Bannon in part by getting rid of the prosecutor, or perhaps as
I think that Bannon knows too much about Trump, and I will be interested to see if Trump bashes him on Twitter, but then moves to somehow help him.
That is interesting, but it also raises the possibility. Look, Steve Bannon is not a complete idiot. He's a very smart guy, and he might, he knows what get out of jail cards he has in his pocket. So that's going to be interesting. Okay, let's move on to topic number 2. Jonathan, you wrote about this for NBC. I thought that, look, the highlight of last night was not the Kamala Harris speech, which I thought was, and I'm going to get a lot of crap for this. I thought it was relatively forgettable, kind of a check the box, go through this stuff. I understand the history, but she was. It was unfortunate for her that she had to come after Barack Obama's speech. Now, Barack Obama was not the first former president to criticize his successor. That has been done before, but nobody did what Barack Obama did last night, going after Donald Trump in very graphic, very direct way. I just want to play the 3 key paragraphs from this speech, and then Jonathan, I want to talk about what you wrote about that this morning. This is the former president.
I never expected that my successor would embrace my vision or continue my policies. I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously, that he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did. For close to 4 years now, he has shown no interest in putting in the work, no interest in finding common ground, no interest in using the awesome power of his office to help anyone but himself and his friends. No interest in treating the presidency as anything but one more reality show that he can use to get the attention he craves. Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't. And the consequences of that failure are severe. 170,000 Americans dead. Millions of jobs gone, while those at the top take in more than ever. Our worst impulses unleashed, our proud reputation around the world badly diminished, and our democratic institutions threatened like never before.
Wow. Okay. Jonathan Allen, that did kind of break the convention open last night, didn't it?
It did, Charlie. It's breathtaking. It was like a Lincoln Project ad without the bombs exploding in the background.
Exactly.
Perhaps the 15-minute version of it. I've never, nor has anyone else, heard a president go after a successor like that. There's a club of presidents. They don't attack each other. Occasionally, they'll take sort of veiled shots at a particular policy, or maybe answer a question in a bank shot way. George H.W. Bush at the 1996 Republican convention said it broke his heart when the office of the president was demeaned or diminished by scandal, but he didn't talk about Bill Clinton by name. He talked about Bob Dole, his friend, who he thought should be elected president. What we saw last night was just absolutely, a very, very different thing than has ever happened in American presidential history, at least in anyone's memory. And I mean, let's remember, it is Donald Trump who wanted to smash these conventions in the first place. He's the one who walked into office talking about how bad Barack Obama was, who wanted to campaign for the last 4 years against Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, who's still doing it, who's responding by tweet. Less important than the sort of personal there between Trump and Obama is the way that Obama is framing the stakes of this election, not around the question so much of Trump's character, but what he thinks Trump's character means for Trump's competence and what the consequences are for the country of that. And that's the loss of American governance, the system of governance, and also, the loss of lives, the loss of livelihoods. and go on down the list.
It was so direct, and I have to say that the shorter speeches in this form of the convention requires a certain economy of language, and it felt stripped down. It felt stripped down and very, very direct, very clean. Just as a writer, it was like just watching, each sentence marshaling direct attacks on Donald Trump. So, AB, it was your reaction to that speech last night.
I thought it was as powerful as everyone else. I was so struck from the beginning that it was a different Obama speech. It was a departure from his, use of beautiful writing mixed with subtlety and it's often aspirational. It's he gets criticized for being kind of too zen and calm and optimistic, really. And to see him use more blunt and accessible language to try to speak not to the political cognoscenti, but to people who have not yet been engaged, don't really understand just the extent to which President Trump is trying to break the system, was so, for those of us who pay attention to all these words so closely, you knew it right away. And it was really shocking. But as everyone concluded, he meant to disturb us. He meant to reach beyond the crowd who's appreciative of, political speeches, and to really sound an alarm across the country among people who are really disenchanted with the system, don't know why Trump won when they were told that Hillary was going to, don't think either party really helps them anyway, and to try to engage them, evoking John Lewis and other ancestors to say they paved the way for you and you can actually do more than they even could. So it'll be really interesting to see in the days and weeks to come, and then after the election, if, what kind of dividends that paid. But he obviously thought long and hard about whether or not he needed to use a cudgel and then how to use a cudgel.
As a kind of a student of political rhetoric, I was struck by the same thing that you were. The normal convention speech is sort of bombastic, with the applause lines and everything. This was more intimate, and I thought it was more powerful. I mean, I understand the people who say that you're lacking the excitement of the crowd, and I miss that too. But this felt like it was crafted very, very differently, and it was really. It was speaking to, I think, exactly where the audience wanted the president to go. Obviously, the president was watching; he was paying attention, and interestingly, he rose to the bait, tweeting in all caps. I mean, the rage tweeting in real time was amazing, because here's Barack Obama saying, "This man will never rise to the occasion. He will never become a grown-up and serious." And then what does what does Trump do? He starts rage tweeting, basically saying, "Yeah, let me confirm exactly what the president just said, Jonathan."
It was deeply unpredictable that that President Trump would respond in that way. You can imagine President Obama working with his speechwriters and thinking, what phrase can we use that will absolutely 100% bait him into proving our point. As far as a crowd goes, I think it was very helpful for Obama that there wasn't a crowd there, because, you can imagine the disruption of applause as he's saying,
crazy.
Your democracy is at stake. 170,000 people have died, millions have lost their jobs. I mean, he's painting, not a bleak picture of the future, but a bleak picture of the present. And the applause bringing him in and bringing him out, and perhaps even at certain points during the speech would have been very incongruous with the basic message of the speech.
No, I agree with that. Okay, now, you feel free to disagree with me about all of this, because I really thought that the Kamala Harris speech, in contrast, felt like a letdown. And your point, Jonathan, is exactly right. The lack of the cheering really strengthened Obama's point, but felt really awkward with Kamala Harris, who just sort of gave kind of a generic, I felt it was a generic speech, and just a weird scenes of this empty convention hall with these reporters sitting around. I don't know. So AB, am I being a little bit unfair? I mean, there was an historic moment. She looked fantastic. She looked great, but it was a weirdly flat, generic speech, I thought.
Yeah, I didn't think it was great, but I do. And maybe, I am always trying to play four-dimensional chess, but I really have given the Biden campaign credit all week for having this be a really sane, calm, grown-up affair where they have locked the squad in the basement and done their best to appeal to center-right voters, independents, former Republicans, college-educated white women, and trotted out all these national security voices of credibility and former Republicans or current Republicans to say Biden is not scary. And so I think that Kamala Harris's speech was, I think the background, the setting was awful, the aesthetics of it. But I do think that it was meant to do no harm, just to introduce her to people who aren't politically engaged, get them excited about her smiling, competent, grown-up American story, career, accomplishments. Show her as a steady hand to replace him 6 months from now or 6 years from now, and to do no harm. And she, from the time being, she looks like an exciting pick, but she was always going to be the do no harm pick. And the only thing about her that makes Joe Biden nervous is that she's ambitious and she's the 2024 nominee. And he did not want the 2024 nominee. He wanted to really just pause all that and have a competent, ready from day one person. But he went for the fact that she will do no harm, but she will excite enough that on balance, you probably gain more voters than lose.
And won't overshadow him.
And so she has not in her speech last Wednesday, and she did not last night. And what I noted was I was watching with my husband, and I realized in the middle that he had not watched 1 minute of any primary debates, and I had watched them all. And what I explained to him was she is not a good number one. She's a good number two. She's never going to mess up. She's going to take direction. She has, as I said, this quintessential American story, which is really incredibly moving, and she tells it very well. But she was full of tacky zingers and cringy, clever attacks in the debates. And she did none of that last night. All she said once was, I know a predator when I see one. I thought it was actually quite suitable. So free from trying to beat everyone else down on the stage, and she was a poor candidate in many ways, with help from the Biden team, who obviously had a big hand in writing that speech, I think she got the job done.
Okay, Jonathan Allen, what did you think of the speech?
I'll associate myself with the remarks of the gentlelady from Washington, D.C., Ms. Stoddard. I think it's really amazing, though, if you take a step back, that we look at Kamala Harris as a safe pick.
Yeah, it is.
The first Black woman, the first South Asian woman, the first woman of color as a vice presidential pick, someone who has been on this ticket for, a week and is not having, her credentials challenged in any real way by anyone. I think the amazing thing about part of the amazing thing about what the Biden team was able to do with their rollout is they kind of skipped right past that. Usually a vice presidential pick will have some, sort of testing out moment where the media and the opposing side kind of rip into the vice presidential candidate and try to figure out how they're not qualified to be the vice president. And there's been none of that with Kamala Harris. She's still a first-term senator. In the conventional sense, that would make her relatively green for the job. But she has a lot of different experiences, attorney general in California, district attorney in San Francisco. And, if you looked around at the field of Black women leaders in the country, it usually takes a lot longer to get to the place that she's gotten to in the United States Senate or at that kind of a level. In fact, we've never had a Black female governor. So I think it's interesting that they've basically cleared that hurdle. She's cleared that hurdle so fast, and it's such an important one. It's the one that tripped up Sarah Palin right out of the gate.
Oh yeah. Do you guys see Sarah Palin on Fox News at all? This thing, I'm sorry this is unkind, but I mean this woman is not unwell. They should not be putting her on television. Okay, so in terms of the emotional highlights, I guess one of the reasons why I felt it was kind of a letdown was because there were some high points, and I know guys aren't supposed to admit this sort of thing, but I will tell you, the Gabby Gifford appearance that wrecked me. I mean, that was powerful. When talking about how difficult it was for her to speak and her comeback and everything, I thought that was an extraordinary moment. I don't think that the Hillary Clinton thing was a particularly high emotional moment, but she did kind of have that, ghost of elections past thing. Like, you can win by 3 million votes and still not win the Electoral College. Trust me. Okay. So guys, because we have so much stuff that is going on, some of this stuff feels old, and maybe we should have seen this coming. But what happened yesterday at the White House is genuinely extraordinary. I mean, we just got to acknowledge when the president of the United States embraces one of the most toxic conspiracy theories out there. I mean, we've been headed in this direction for a really, really long time, but I thought it was still just staggering to watch the president of the United States fully embrace the crazy from the podium when he was asked about QAnon. And let's just play some of this, because this is the president of the United States giving a green light to this massive conspiracy theory that is now, I mean, let's face it, whatever happens with Donald Trump, this is going to be one of his legacy. These folks could not have gotten a better answer to this question. Let's play that.
During the pandemic, the QAnon movement appears to be gaining a lot of followers. Can you talk about what you think about that and what you have to say to people who are following this movement right now?
Well, I don't know much about the movement other than I understand they like me very much, which I appreciate. But I don't know much about the movement. I have heard that it is gaining in popularity, and from what I've heard, these are people that when they watch the streets of Portland, when they watch what happened in New York City in just the last 6 or 7 months, but this was starting even 4 years ago when I came here, almost 4 years, can you believe it? These are people that don't like seeing what's going on in places like Portland and places like Chicago and New York and other cities and states. And I've heard these are people that love our country and they just don't like seeing it. So I don't know really anything about it other than they do supposedly like me, and they also would like to see problems in these areas, like especially the areas that we're talking about, go away, because there's no reason the Democrats can't run a city. And if they can't, we will send in all of the federal, whether it's troops or law enforcement, whatever they'd like, we'll send them in, we'll straighten out their problem in 24 hours or less, okay?
Well, just real quick, at the crux of the theory is this belief that you are secretly saving the world from this satanic cult of pedophiles and cannibals. Does that sound like something you are behind?
Well, I haven't heard that, but is that supposed to be a bad thing or a good thing? I mean, if I can help save the world from problems, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to put myself out there. And we are, actually. We're saving the world from a radical left philosophy that will destroy this country. And when this country is gone, the rest of the world would follow.
A.B. Stoddard, here's the president of the United States, asked about, hey, by the way, do you understand that we're talking about people who think that there's this vast conspiracy of pedophiles, and a satanic cult with pedophiles, and criminals out there, and the president embraces it. So
it's just so
what is it left to say
hard,
about
Charlie, to just digest the totality of outrages that happened this week. Once again, so many things get drowned out because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and then also the attention paid to the Democratic National Convention, that this bipartisan Senate Intel Committee report drops that says that the campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who basically managed to really derail the special counsel report because it's clear he and a Russian intelligence agent had, deleted a whole bunch of evidence that could have led to criminal charges. But I digress. And the president says things he has his spokeswoman say things like he'll assess the election results and make a determination about how he feels about them when the day after the election or whatever. There's so many crazy, outrageous, incredibly frightening things happening all at the same time. And he almost seemed to anticipate the question on QAnon, relish it, and then once again, because there's a hurricane of news, Republicans feel that they can just put their head under their mattresses and pretend it's not going on. And I forgive me if I leave out any Republicans, but by this morning, I think I've only seen Ben Sass, Jeb Bush, and Adam Kinzinger say that
you can count them with your fingers left over. Well, I mean, this is the thing. Jeb Bush tweets out, "Why in the world would the president not kick QAnon supporters' butts? Nut jobs, racists, haters have no place in either party." And of course, the obvious question was, why isn't every other prominent Republican saying the same thing? And I think you're right.
I mean,
about
Charlie,
all of
the
this.
FBI has deemed them a domestic terrorist threat. Let me repeat that.
Yeah,
a domestic terrorist threat. So even though DHS agents have poured into the streets of Portland and these places that the president says are evil war zones belonging to some other group of Americans not worth his governance, he treats them as domestic terrorists, the protesters. They have not actually been deemed domestic terrorists. QAnon has. And only less than a handful of Republicans this morning have criticized the president for snuggling up to them and giving them exactly what they've been waiting for years, which is
So Jonathan Allen, last week everybody was like rolling their eyes about this QAnon conspiracy supporter who won a congressional primary in Georgia, and the fact that the Republicans were still embracing her. But take a step back here. How is the president of the United States any different than her? I mean, it's like there are people out there, particularly in the anti-Trump world, who go, well, of course, we're not going to go along with the Laura Loomers of the world and the people who believe in the QAnon conspiracy. That's a bridge too far. And yet here is the president embracing this absolutely bizarre theory, embracing people who are, I mean, there's nothing subtle about Laura Loomer's bigotry and everything or her racism. And yet, once again, we have complete silence, don't we, from the Republicans? Is this
there's also nothing subtle about the president's bigotry or racism. His answer on QAnon isn't that different than his answer when Jake Tapper asked him about David Duke.
Exactly.
In back in 2015 or early 2016. This is he has created a permission structure, if you will, for any Republican candidate to embrace any wild-eyed theory, any wild-eyed view, any policy, or any sort of bigotry that they want to, as long as it's in the name of supporting Donald Trump, because he ultimately is the strongest purveyor of all of these things. I mean, usually the president is somewhere inside the boundary of the extreme, and is trying to hide the people who are the extremists that support him. Whether that's, I'm not really with the Birchers. If they want to vote for me, I can't stop them. Not like I love QAnon. I'm glad they're with me.
They love me. Yeah. Well, no, by the way, this is an important point. And I'm going to set my hair on fire here for just a second. Forget about Russian interference or disinformation. The biggest vector of conspiracy theories and disinformation in the world right now is Donald Trump, the president of the United States. So if the QAnon people now have sort of gotten his blessing, no conspiracy. Okay, let me put it this way. Imagine a completely false conspiracy theory about the election or about Joe Biden. Any lie, anything in the last minute of the campaign. Normally, there would be some sort of like, well, how will they spread it? What are the fact checkers going to say? The fact is that the president of the United States is apparently willing and able to spread any of those conspiracy theories to his 85 million supporters or whatever the number is. And there's no way to stop that dam. I mean, so we are in a completely different world. And by the way, when I just wanted to take a moment here because we throw out words like crazy and bigots and stuff, and it's almost becomes generic. But people like Laura Loomer, who won that congressional primary down in Florida and was congratulated by Trump. I mean, she's not just a far right activist. I mean, this is a really detestable human being who has a long track record of celebrating cruelty and applauding the death of migrants and Muslims. And it's really extraordinary. Somebody at one point tweeted out, over 2,000 migrants have died crossing the Mediterranean so far. And Laura Loomer goes, good, clappy hands. Here's to 2,000 more. When that white nationalist terrorist went into killed 51 people in Christchurch, New Zealand, she went on social media and basically said, I don't care. I just don't care. And yet these are the kinds of people now that are being openly and enthusiastically embraced by the president of the United States 75 days out from an election. Okay, so that was my hair on fire.
Well, and Charlie, I think it's important to kind of make the point here. They also reflect, because they're winning primaries and some will eventually win general elections, they reflect majority views in, at least in their party in those districts, and in some cases eventually will reflect more majority views in districts that encompass about 800,000 people. I mean, and that doesn't happen if the leader of the party is denouncing it, right? It could happen, but it is much more likely to happen with the support and encouragement of the leader of the party than if the leader of the party is saying, you know what, I don't want to have any part of that. I think it's reprehensible.
Well, so AB Stoddard, look, I'm not saying that there's any, four-dimensional chess here, but there's that reptilian sense that Donald Trump has, and I think he had it in 2016 when he realized, I'm not going to repudiate David Duke and the alt-right because this is part of my constituency. And you look at what he said yesterday, he's acknowledging that the fever swamps and QAnon have become a part of his constituency. And as long as they like him, he's going to give them love in return.
That's the bottom line. And the good thing is that he always shows us who he is. And he said, apparently they like me. And that's, he lights up because he's animated by grievance and he seeks adulation. And as Obama said last night, he craves it. And so he's it's much an open book when it comes to whether it's white supremacists or anyone supporting him. He's never going to say a bad word. Jonathan's right. He has the ability to end someone's candidacy or viability in a primary election in days or hours or in one tweet. And he, I think, sent 5 Laura Loomer congratulation tweets. And then Kayleigh McEnany tried to pretend it was business as usual. And he always congratulates all the primary winners that were endorsed. And then she went on to talk about how much he supports the Muslim community in her smooth way. It was pretty amusing. But no, he is really not holding back these days, and I think he's actually hoping. In some way, he's hoping it's kind of growing his numbers.
Well, I don't know whether he thinks that or not, but there was a really interesting tell in that soundbite we played from him where he goes, he does that usual "I don't know who they are" type thing, which is always sort of boilerplate. But then he says, "But people tell me." This is now, Jonathan. Remember, we're all old enough to remember when we used to talk about the grown-ups in the room and everything, and the people who would, try to, keep the president from doing really, really crazy things. That to me was a tell because you would think that there would be people around the president with 75 days to go until the election saying, hey, by the way, do not congratulate QAnon. The QAnon, this is dangerous. This is toxic. This is the kind of thing that's going to blow up in your face. These people are nut jobs. Steer clear of them, right? There would be somebody who would be telling him that. Clearly, that's either not happening or they have been drowned out by other voices in the president's ear who are telling him, these are good guys. They like you. They're patriots. They love America. I mean, that's a dangerous tell, I think.
I mean, at this point, I think it's pretty clear that it's the latter.
Yeah.
If you want the president not to do something, you tell him to do it, I think. And then the other sort of golden rule is the people around him are the ones who encourage him to pay only attention to the people that love him and give him adulation. There's, I mean,
but who is that? Who is Jared Kushner saying, hey, QAnon, good guys, we need them? Who tells the president this kind of shit?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the president has ready access to social media, so there's that. I wouldn't. I don't know for a fact. I would just be speculating
I
about.
think you're right about that.
About QAnon.
No, I think you're right. I mean, he's getting a lot of this stuff completely unfiltered. AB, do you know who would not want, if you want Trump to be reelected, wouldn't you want to keep him away from this stuff?
That's a good question. I don't know how much he digests social media by himself or with the help of like Scovino or whatever those people are that help him tweet sometimes. So I can't really get my hands around how much of a team effort it is, but he clearly retweets crazy stuff late at night. So he is, we're talking about him like he's 7. He is allowed on the screen by himself, apparently, from time to time. But
AB, if he was at your house, would he have a phone in his hands at that hour?
I think that I think it's clear, look, from the last kind of year or so that no one can stop him from any of this crazy stuff. There's a pattern where there's a pullback occasionally, like with the post office. There's like clearly an en masse series of phone calls from Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn and Kevin McCarthy and people calling from Capitol Hill saying the veterans aren't getting their medication and this post office thing is really dumb, or whatever. You can't shut down the border with Mexico. We have a long list of examples. And then he goes quiet on the thing for a little bit. But largely, 9 out of 10 of these examples, he does not care. And he thinks that he knows best what is appealing to a winning slice of the electorate.
And there is this sort of weird, I've described it in the past as a vortex, which I don't fully understand how it works, sort of, drawing people toward the crazy. The fact that now the president of the United States is aligned with the people from VDARE and Michelle Malkin and Matt Gaetz and Roger Stone. And it feeds on itself, driving them further and further into the fever swamps, further and further from the right. I mean, think about the moment we're in right now, that Mitt Romney and John McCain and George W. Bush are completely excommunicated, and he's listening and applauding people like Laura Loomer. And yet most of the Republican Party is completely okay with this. Okay, in the few minutes we have left, speaking of crazy things, Jonathan Allen, normally this would be a big thing. The President of the United States attacking a major U.S. employer, urging a boycott of Goodyear. Goodyear has more than 60,000 American employees. They're a major employer in the state of Ohio. And because of a report that there was a slide during one of these diversity sessions saying that you shouldn't wear MAGA apparel, the President of the United States is using his bully pulpit to attack this company. Again, in Earth 2.0, this would be a massive story. Right now, it's probably like what? Number 5, number 6?
Yeah, if that. But it's instructive because the value of that for him can be had without him driving it.
Yes.
Right? It's like one of those great stories for him if it like pops up on Drudge or, through various other media, if Fox is talking about it and he doesn't weigh in on it. Or even if he comes out and says, look, Goodyear's a great American company. Obviously, I would prefer if they weren't telling people not to wear my hats, but great. It's a great company, and I'm glad to support American companies. And he could get the benefit on both sides. But instead, he attacks this American company in the middle of a recession and gets that blowback. And then you see with Goodyear stock rising, at least at one point, that it's not even all that effective in hurting the company.
Oh, that's, Jonathan, that was a great point, because this was one of those where, hey, the company, there's some legitimate criticism saying that, you can wear Black Lives Matter, but you can't wear Blue Lives Matter. Okay, so we could have a debate about those double standards and about whether or not that was fair and reasonable. And I think that if you just sort of let the conservative media go on all of that, his media go on all of that, people would have said, hey, here's more of, the cancel culture and everything. Instead, he takes it to a whole different level. Again, but a reminder of his willingness and enthusiasm for using the power of the presidency to attack private companies that offend him personally or politically. I wrote in my newsletter this morning, there are a lot of words to describe that impulse, but conservative is not one of them. Do you remember the days, AB, when conservatives would say that we shouldn't have the government telling companies, private companies, what they can say or not say?
I want to beg the forgiveness of your listeners if I've said this on a long ago pod with you, but when President Trump threatened a boycott of the Harley Davidson company on Twitter, at the time, I knew that Republicans, had Barack Obama done the same thing, would have gone to the White House and dragged him out in his bathrobe. Because free market Republicans who are not going to let the government use its power to pick winners and losers in among private companies. And so this story is so wonderful on so many levels. He didn't actually talk about the Blue Lives Matter or the cops, which Kayleigh McEnany tried to pretend this was about. He just was really upset about the MAGA hats. And that's what the tweet is about. And it's not just in Ohio. Apparently, it's in a whole bunch. The facilities are in a whole bunch of other swing states as well: North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia, Texas, Florida. Like, the guy just shooting himself in the face, and no Republican can come out and say, like, actually, we really are more concerned about American workers at a great American company, and we don't pick winners and losers. They just all have to continue to cower and pretend it didn't happen.
I mean, Charlie and AB, we're talking about a president who doesn't really think through what he's talking about a lot. The other day, he was in Minnesota, and he started down the stretch of stimulus spending and how Democrats wanted to just spend money in blue states with blue governors and how terrible that was. And it was like 2/3 of the way through his train of thought that he seemed to realize that he was standing in a blue state with a blue governor telling Minnesota that essentially that it didn't deserve money. Before he stopped himself, he kind of chuckled, and you're like, oh, the wheels are actually turning as you're saying this. We're talking about a president who said there were very fine people on both sides after watching people with tiki torches chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Guess what? President Trump's grandchildren are Jewish.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, like, what are the implications for his grandchildren of the tiki torch movement that he thinks is very fine? This is...
Well, they both like him.
This is not someone who's thinking a lot of this stuff through. And, I think that he has, again, as we've all seen, a very, very committed base that doesn't need there to be logical consistency to what he's doing to follow him. And I think that, every single American voter will give flexibility to somebody they like to some degree. The extent to which he is given the flexibility to not have sort of logical merit to the set of thoughts that he has is unlike any I've ever seen.
Also, Charlie, just on an amusing example, I think that the Bulwark should give a prize to any listener that can review his answer on Hong Kong from yesterday, where he talks about how this guy, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, who was arrested, must be a really nice guy and he must be a brave guy. But really, everything now is redounding to the benefit of the U.S. because now that Hong Kong has lost their freedom, we're going to have some better, stock market margins and stuff. It is one of the most incoherent and classic Trump hilarities I've seen in a really long time. So if you maybe, people have time on their hands in the pandemic to roll some briefing tape from yesterday, but I highly recommend it.
So are we supposed to take him seriously, literally, or what? Yeah. Well, who was it who said when the pandemic was exploding that this was going to be really good for the United States because it was going to hurt China and therefore our business would become much, much stronger? Was that Navarro? Was that?
Yeah.
I mean, so these crazy notions sort of ping pong around inside this White House. AB, Stoddard, Jonathan Allen, thank you so much for joining me on the Bulwark Podcast today.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
And thank you all for listening to today's Bulwark Podcast. This is the fourth in our series of special convention podcasts. I'm Charlie Sykes. We will be back tomorrow, and we'll do this all over again. And a reminder, there are now 75 days left until the election.